I'm James Henson, and welcome to the Walk Through Open Doors podcast. I have 20 years of experience as a therapist, mentor, and coach, and in that time I've helped countless people recognize the opportunities available to them regardless of their situation, and I've helped them make choices that align with their values and keep them excited about their lives. In this podcast, I'll show you how to walk through open doors, those opportunities that are right in front of you that are affordable, exciting, aligned, and sustainable. Far too often, people miss these moments by focusing on struggle or getting trapped by jealousy and victimhood. My goal is to show you that life doesn't always have to be difficult. Sometimes the right path is right in front of you. Each week, we'll talk about practical steps and mindset shifts to help you act with clarity and confidence. Whether you're a leader, an entrepreneur, or someone looking for change, this podcast will help you step into the rooms you want to be in. All right, welcome back to Walk Through Open Doors with James Henson. This is a podcast where we look at the things you can do to have the best life possible, to seize the opportunities that are around you, and to make the changes you want to make. I know all this sounds like, it just sounds like standard boilerplate motivation bullshit, but everything that I talk about on here comes from 20 years of experience of working with people as a social worker, as a therapist, as a campus mentor, as a life coach now. I work as a business coach. I've worked with people pretty much nonstop for 20 years. And in all of those relationships, we've talked about how to improve their life. What are the concrete actual choices and changes you can make to have the life you want to have? That's really all I care about. I don't like talking about anything that's not actionable. I don't like talking about anything that can't have a direct impact on your life. So I don't. And with that in mind, today we're going to talk about one of the most important things any of us can possibly have in our life, one of the most important things we can embrace, and that is ownership. This topic is near and dear to my heart because it changed my life in such a radical way. I have a distinct divide in my life before I started taking ownership and after I started taking ownership. And the change is just so profound that I love this topic, but I also struggle with it because it's really been just kind of co-opted and taken over by, like this hustle and grind and kind of douchebag influencer type that kind of uses it to beat people over the head and is, if you're not doing this, you're a sissy and you've got to do these 10 things. And I don't want it to be like that. I don't want to have that conversation. There's a million people having that conversation and they're all in better shape and, probably wealthier than I am. So I don't want to talk about it in that sense. What I want to talk about is ownership in like a totalistic sense. Ownership of your decisions, ownership of their outcomes, ownership of the choices you make, ownership of the choices you don't make, ownership of who you are as a person, ownership of your thoughts, ownership of your emotions, taking ownership of everything in your life up to and including the kind of person you are, because I think that matters. You can take ownership of everything else, take ownership of all your choices and do all the cool outward stuff. But if you're a bad person and you don't treat people well, it's not worth anything. It's a waste of your time. And it's just going to hurt other people around you. So when we talk about ownership, I want to be clear. I don't look at this from like a moral perspective. There is no morality to ownership in my mind because, I think we use morality a lot to push things on people when we can't really justify pushing those things. When we talk about ownership and accountability and responsibility, I don't have to bring any kind of moral argument into it because by taking ownership and by being accountable and being responsible, your life is going to improve in so many ways that there doesn't need to be a moral clause or moral judgment to it. Taking ownership will improve your life. So today we're going to talk about what ownership is. We're going to talk about what it looks like. We're going to talk about what it looks like when somebody doesn't take ownership of their life. I'm going to use myself as an example for that because I don't like, I don't want to be judgmental towards other people. I don't want to tell other people's stories. So I have plenty of stories about a lack of ownership and how it affected my life. And we're going to look at just a couple ways you can start bringing ownership into your life. But I've also written something over on Substack specifically for that. So we're not going to spend too much time on that part of it. So ownership is it's simple. It's taking full responsibility for your choices, for the things you do, for the things you don't do, taking accountability for it, owning it, not making excuses, and doing what you can to make things right when you need to. It's about being proactive. It's about investing in your own life, about taking it seriously. That is ownership. That's all it is. There doesn't need to be any kind of judgment around it. I used to have a lot of judgment for people who weren't taking ownership in their life. It really bothered me. I think, the things that really bother us are the things that trigger things in ourselves. And I remembered what it was like. And so it always bothered me when people didn't take ownership. What I've learned through going to therapy for a year and stuff like that is just that a lot of that is really based around resilience. A lot of people are kind of operating at the height of their resilience, and they can't really take ownership for much more without kind of damaging their identity or bringing a whole lot of negative emotions and just difficult thoughts and feelings into their lives. That's cool. You still need to take ownership for those things, but it's helped me realize that, a lack of resilience is not the same as like laziness or an active choice not to engage in life. But you are still responsible for your lack of resilience. If you're not as resilient as you need to be, you need to do things to start building that, because that is yours. It may not be your fault, but it is your responsibility. Something does not have to be your fault to be your responsibility. If I'm just sitting in my house, I'm hanging out with my family, doing nothing to anybody, and some random person decides to set my house on fire, that's not my fault. Let's say I don't know them, I never did anything to them, they flipped a coin and picked a house. That's not my fault, but I better go put the fire out or I'm not going to have a home anymore. There are so many things in life that are not your fault, but they are your responsibility. And learning to reach out and grab those things and make them yours and make the most of them is probably the most life-changing thing you can do. So the key elements of taking ownership are things like responsibility, accountability, proactiveness. You have to lean into life. You have to reach out for the things that you want to do if you want to take ownership. You cannot be passive. You can't just sit back and have things happen and then just, I didn't know. I had no idea. You can't make decisions and have them go sideways and not take responsibility for them. You have to have a sense of self-awareness in all of this as well. Most of the people I know who cannot take responsibility for things, most of the people I know who have no accountability, it's because of a lack of self-awareness. It's not that they do this math and they think okay, I did this thing and it is my fault, but I don't want to do it. Instead, their brain is doing all this math, explaining to them why it's not their fault. How the brain looks at every option, maybe it's 99% likely that something is their fault. Their brain goes and finds that 1% and expands it and just says, well, it could have been this. It might not have been me. Somebody borrows your car and they drive it for the night and they come back and it comes back and it's damaged. Nobody has touched it since then. The most likely option for that is that they did something to damage your car. But they have a thing in their brain that says maybe somebody hit it after I parked it. Maybe that was already there and I didn't even notice. Maybe my friend who loaned me my car went and wrecked their car, parked it, and now they're blaming me. Those are unlikely scenarios, but in their mind, it makes sense because they don't have the resilience to step forward and say, yeah, I did that. I'm sorry. What do we do to make it right? We can understand where people are coming from on that, but that doesn't mean you can allow them into your life. One thing I've learned is that if you allow people in your life who have no sense of ownership, you really have two options when it comes to their behavior. You can just accept what they do and move on and ignore it and do what you need to do in response, or you can remove them from your life. That sounds like a harsh dichotomy, but when you try to talk to somebody and they can't take ownership, they can't accept responsibility, you're wasting your breath trying to do anything else because they don't see what you're talking about as their problem. They don't see that they have any hand in it. It's like somebody coming to me and talking to me about an asteroid that's going to hit the planet. There's no reason to talk to me about that. I have nothing to do with it. I didn't bring it to our door. I can't fix it. And so that I will not take ownership of it. There's no way I can do that. That's an extreme example, but I know a lot of people who do that with just the most minor things in their lives. Every single thing that happens is somebody else's fault. If it's not somebody else's fault, at the bare minimum, it's not their fault. And when that's the mentality that somebody lives in, you are wasting your breath trying to talk to them. So you just need to stop, take ownership of your side of that, and stop frustrating yourself by expecting ownership and accountability from people who do not have that. That is a waste of your time. The quickest way to recognize that somebody does not take ownership for their life is things like blaming others. Something is always everybody else's fault. You would think that when the same thing happens to somebody over and over and over again, and the same people are telling them the same things over the course of their life, that they would step back and be able to say, oh, maybe this is me. That's that lack of self-awareness kicking in, though. They can't do that. Another thing to look for is always having an excuse. There are some people that no matter what happens, there's some excuse or in their mind a reason for why it's not their fault. If they don't think it's their fault, they're not going to take ownership of it, and you are wasting your time. And then another thing I see, and this is a more subtle manifestation of a lack of ownership, but it's kind of like a passivity about life. They feel like things happen to them. They feel like nothing's their fault because it's just, circumstances beyond their control. There are circumstances beyond our control. They're very, very real. And depending on who you are and where you fall into our society, those things are different. And some people have more of them. It doesn't change the fact that you are responsible for your response to those things you can't control. If you can't recognize that, there's nothing, like, what are you going to do? What are you going to do if you cannot recognize your responsibility in anything? Those are the three things I tend to see in people who don't have a sense of ownership or accountability. And I'll say it again. When you find somebody like that in your life, you can choose to just let them do what they're going to do. Let them go about their business, and you do your best to minimize the impact, or, fix what you can fix, take responsibility, what you can take responsibility for, or you can go ahead and move them out of your life. If you're not willing to do those two things, they are going to drive you up the wall all the time. When I think about like a hallmark example of somebody, of what it looks like to not have ownership, to not take responsibility, the only thing I can think of, the best example I can think of, is young James, is younger me 20, 25 years ago, somewhere in there. I had no sense of responsibility. I had no sense of accountability. I did not have the resilience to admit when I did something wrong. I did not have the resilience to acknowledge how my choices were affecting me and damaging my life. I was an entitled, whiny little shit. I don't want to go through all the details. I've talked about it in so many podcasts. I don't want to go through all the details of my life again. But at a young age, I had developed a drinking and drug problem. I had a profound sense of being owed something. I think maybe because things happened to me when I was young, I thought that the universe owed me something. I don't know. But these things led me to drop out of high school and to get kicked out of college the first 4 times. It is one of those things where it's like, if I don't show up for work, did I quit or did I get fired? That's how getting kicked out of college was. Like, I wasn't doing what I was supposed to do and I got booted. Which was it? Did I quit or did they fire me? It doesn't matter, because the impact on my life was the same, and it was really negative. It was really hurt or harmful and hard to overcome. And I think what's an important example of this is that I did have some mental health problems. I think I was very depressed and very anxious back in a time when we didn't talk about those things. We didn't have that languaging for everything. Like I said, I had issues with drugs and alcohol, I think because I was masking, mental health issues. But the fact of the matter is that in masking those mental health issues, that came about because I failed to take responsibility for my own mental health. I failed to take responsibility for my emotions. And so instead of doing anything healthy with them, I just tried to stuff them down with drugs and alcohol and just general wild behavior. This was a pattern in my life for so long, that refusal to take responsibility. By refusing to take responsibility for those things, I ended up dropping out of high school. And I blamed everybody else. Well, it's stupid. They make me take classes I don't want to take. The teachers have it in for me. If they would just let me work all the time, I'd be fine. I liked having a job. I liked being in in-school suspension. I did good in in-school suspension. They would send me my work. I would do my work. I'd send it back to them, and then I could read the rest of the day. And so I would say, well, if they would just let me stay in in-school suspension, I would have been fine. They had like a maximum amount you could be in in-school suspension. Then they'd send you back to regular class. None of it matters. Those were the rules. That was the system I was a part of, that I was living within. And I chose to blame the system instead of looking at my own actions. I felt like everything was somebody else's fault. I felt like it was out of my control. So dropping out was probably a pretty natural and inevitable path for me. I don't know what other way it would have gone. This all continued into college. Because I dropped out of high school, I never passed like the state test. So I was called task liable, I think it was. And I didn't pass for math, so I had to be in a task liable course in college. I had to be in that class to be in college, and you could only miss that class 3 times. I missed that class all the time. I didn't think it was necessary. I said, "Oh, I'm an English major. I don't need this. Math is not. It shouldn't be a part of my major." Cool. You know what? When I skipped that class 3 times and got kicked out of the class, I got kicked out of school. This happened. I think this happened 2 or 3 times, and then I ended up getting kicked out of another school just for bad grades. So this mentality that I had, that, oh, this is the way things should be. We talked about it on the last episode, talking about pragmatism. I was very unpragmatic about how I lived. I had this sense that this was all their fault. They were imposing this on me. In high school, I said, they're imposing it on me. I don't even want to be here. Y'all are making me be here. And so I shouldn't have to follow your rules. In college, I was choosing to be there, and I still bitched and moaned. So a lack of ownership, a lack of accountability, it will find its way into your life no matter what choices you make, as long as that's what you live with. Because of the drugs and the alcohol and the entitlement and just the general sense of just I don't know what to call it. I was very weak and non-resilient. Because of this, I was messy as hell. I was just a messy person. And so when non-messy people would recognize this about me, they would put appropriate boundaries in place. And even though this happened over and over and over again, I would still step back and say, oh my gosh, I just don't have friends. People aren't loyal anymore. Nobody understands me. Nobody's willing just to walk everything out with me. Instead of looking at myself, I looked at them. and I blamed them for it. I did this with friends. I did this with girlfriends. I did this with anybody who came into contact with me who didn't do exactly what I wanted them to do, what I thought they should do. And the thing was, because I had no ownership and because I had no sense of accountability, I was kind of stupid and didn't know what was good for me. So people who were making healthy decisions in regard to me were a problem. Because of the way I lived, I was on the cops' radar all the time. They knew who I was. They paid attention to me. And once again, instead of being able to say, well, maybe if I wasn't doing criminal things and breaking the law, they would leave me alone. No, it was the cop's fault. That cop just has it in for me. Oh, the cops just have it in for me. It was always somebody else's fault. The results of this were very predictable. I believed that I had no agency in my life, so I didn't make choices. When you don't have agency, you don't think your choices matter. You don't recognize that. So I kept making the same choices until everything just got so messy for me that there was nowhere else to turn except for to start taking some responsibility. And I've talked about that a million times. Having a kid, that changed my life. When I recognized that, oh my gosh, I am an active agent in this. I remember holding my son as a baby and looking at him. And I don't know if I said it out loud or if I thought it. In my memory, I said it out loud. And I said, I'm sorry, kid, but you got screwed in the dad lottery. Because I knew myself at that point where I was gonna do my best. I was gonna have good intentions, but things were gonna get hard and I was gonna bounce. For some reason, in that moment, this little voice popped up in my head. And it just said, what if you did something different? And it got traction. And I started taking responsibility for things. I started just the way I live my life. I became intentional. I became proactive about it. I started meditating and cultivating self-awareness. I went to people who I'd wronged and said, yo, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for that. And it's a good example of that. Just because you take ownership, it doesn't mean that it's going to change how other people see you. There's a lot of people who I apologized to, and their answer was essentially, appreciate that, but I'm good with you over there, with you staying out of my life. Cool. At first that hurt my feelings and I wanted to move into these excuses. Well, what's the point of turning this around and trying to do better if nobody's going to understand? No, shut up and accept responsibility. By accepting responsibility for what I'd done, I also had to accept that other people might not jump back on board with me. Cool. Good for them for having good boundaries. I can't blame them at this point in my life. So these days I do a pretty good job of accepting responsibility. I am quick to say that was my fault. I'm quick to recognize what I need to do differently. I think I've been told that sometimes I take too much responsibility for things. That's probably where like responsibility and ownership move into like my need for control, But I try to be honest about it. And when I'm in the wrong, I try to admit it pretty quickly. I see two areas in my life where I'm still not taking as much ownership as I should. One of them is in regard to like social media and Reddit and being online. Like that always makes me feel crappy. That always makes me feel negative, a little stressed out, a little anxious. I keep doing it. That is me not taking full ownership of how things affect me mentally and emotionally. And so I've taken steps to start to address it. I got this little thing called a brick and I just tap my phone to it. It shuts everything off. I've got to be where I don't check those. Right now I'm actually fasting from the news in general, just to get a break from all that stress-inducing stuff. And then the second area where I've struggled with this for years and it sucks, but my physical health, I am on top of my mental and emotional well-being. I meditate, I read, I take care of that. I'm always learning. I'm always trying to grow. And my physical health always falls to the wayside. I stopped taking my blood pressure medication a while back. I've had high blood pressure ever since COVID or just something. Ever since COVID or my thyroid, I don't know. Something kicked off my blood pressure. It's been a real problem. I have felt like absolute shit for months, just dragging myself through the day. Well, I go to a medical appointment the other day, my blood pressure's through the roof. They said it was like near stroke levels. Start taking my medication again. Oh my gosh, I feel better. Because that opened up a little bit of space for me. So now I'm walking again every day. I'm trying to have more movement. I'm doing more woodwork and things like that. But like this failure to take responsibility for my physical health has consequences. Now, I have good reasons for it. I have these herniated discs and my neck hurts all the time and a pinched nerve and a torn tendon in my arm. Excuses. They're reasons, but they're also just excuses. There are things I can do within that realm of physical health. And by taking ownership, I do notice my life is better. I just have to take ownership of that every day because that one's hard for me. I don't enjoy it. I don't enjoy working out. It's not my thing. But me not liking it changes nothing. That changes nothing. I still have to be able to lean in and do what I need to do. So those are two areas where I'm working on taking more ownership in my life. Now, when we talk about ownership in terms of like having a good life and making good choices and seizing opportunities and walking through those open doors, you will never get anything done ever in your life if you don't take ownership for things. You cannot seize opportunities because you won't even recognize them. With a lack of ownership and you think everything's out of your control, you don't even think about the opportunities. It's so many people I talk to, they live their life like they're watching a movie. Like when I'm watching a movie, I don't get stressed out or overthink what a person should have done because it's already written. We already know how it goes. Especially think of a movie you've already seen. We know every decision they're going to make. You know how it ends. So you don't question those decisions. You don't hope they're going to do something different. It's crazy, but so many people live their lives in that exact way. They can't seize opportunities because they don't see them as theirs. You can't do anything. You can't do things that are in line with your values because you don't know what they are. When you live your life with no ownership, with no responsibility, you just do whatever comes your way. You can't do anything at all as far as your values go because you don't know what they are. You don't take responsibility for them. People who don't take responsibility for their values and choose who they want to be, they're whatever comes along. Oh, what's that old song? You got to stand for something or you'll fall for anything. That's taking ownership. This stuff really matters because we live in a culture now that in the name of compassion, I don't think it's sinister, but in the name of compassion, we are removing ownership from people at every turn. We are saying, this is not your fault. This is society's fault. This is oppressive structure's fault. This is your parents' fault. This is your friend's fault. Like it's so nonstop that we're giving people an excuse. And I think maybe we don't want people to feel bad about themselves. I don't know. We can say it's compassionate, but compassion without a sense of like confrontation or grit is not real compassion. It's just, I don't know, it's probably just like pity and enabling. I hate that word because it's so overused. But when we just have compassion for somebody without expecting anything of them, we're just enabling them. And that's not compassionate. That's shitty and lazy is what that is. That's not wanting to take the time to confront somebody to say, hey, your life sucks, but if you stop doing this, it would get better. Like if you look at our politicians and you look at our celebrities, they don't take ownership. We've gotten so used to these like fake apologies. I'm so sorry if the actions I may have committed may have impacted anybody in a negative way, but I need to remind you that I did it because that's become the standard. That's become the standard. We don't expect anything of people. When somebody fails, we say, oh, it's this person's fault, it's this person's fault, it's this group's fault, it's this structure's fault, whatever you want to call it. That may sound nice to make them, and maybe it does make them feel better in the moment, but it also teaches them that they don't have an active role in their own life. It teaches them that everything is just coming at them, that their life is on a rail, and that they can't do anything different. And that's one of the worst things you can teach people. To disempower people like that is such a crappy thing to do to them. It's a terrible thing to do. I had people do it to me. I had people tell me because of my mental health, because of depression and anxiety and other things I dealt with, because of addiction issues, that things were not my fault. Absolutely. They meant that to be nice, but they absolutely harmed me in that. They delayed me doing better by years and years because I bought into it. And it was easy for me to buy into because I wanted to. I liked thinking things weren't my fault. So the reason we're looking at these and like, what does it look like to not have a sense of responsibility is because you will see that it only hurts you. It only damages the person who has no ownership. And when, as a culture or a society or as us as individuals, when we put that on somebody in the name of compassion, we are not helping them. We are doing them harm. It's a shitty thing to do to them. Now, the really cool thing about ownership, though, is that once you start doing it, it becomes almost addictive. Like you want to do more and more and more of it just because it makes such a difference in your life. Your life starts to change in such a way that you want more of that. So it's like a positive addiction. It's like a positive, it's dopamine. It's good kind of dopamine, the kind that's supposed to help us grow and evolve and do better. When it comes down to it, ownership is one of the single most important things we can do. That's why we're talking about this. There's no reason looking at opportunities and trying to do more with your life if you don't have the mindsets that are going to allow you to continue. A mindset of pragmatism, as we talked about last time, will let you make decisions that benefit your life every day. A mindset of ownership will let you make decisions and own them and actually do something with them. Ownership is what will allow you to build and create something new for yourself because you're acknowledging that it's yours. If we don't acknowledge something is ours, we're never going to do anything with it. That's just the way it works. If you believe everything is outside your control, then your life is going to suck. Everything is going to always be coming at you and you're just going to feel helpless. It's the opposite of empowerment. So many of the things we talk about these days in the name of empowerment are actually profoundly disempowering. and we just leave people to that. That's not the right thing to do. That's not compassionate. We can't change society, we can't change the culture, but we can change what we do for ourselves. And so embracing a sense of ownership is the thing that will let you start taking those steps to do what you want to do and be who you want to be. And that's an amazing feeling. That's an amazing way to live your life. So everything we've talked about today is I think it's good and it's helpful, but we have to be able to bring it into our lives. Because of this, I wrote a little post over on Substack about just 5 ways you can start taking ownership today. It's 5 simple, concrete things that you can do right now that will start to allow you to take ownership and to start really just building that into your life. It's available for free. It's just jamescotthenson.substack.com. I post on there pretty regularly. But you don't even have to subscribe to go read this one. It's when you go there, it'll be like a little box to subscribe. You can subscribe. It's free. It'll come to your inbox. You can unsubscribe whenever you want, or just click no thanks, and it should take you to my where my posts are. But it's 5 ways that you can start taking ownership right now. Like no money, no time, just things you can do, just simple steps you can take to walk through the door of ownership and start walking through a million other doors in your life too. That's what this is all about, is that how do we do things that are going to lead us from one step after the other to where we want to be. If you've been listening to this and you recognize that, oh my gosh, this is something I struggle with. I do not have a sense of ownership. I'm not good at taking responsibility. I'm not taking accountability. I'm not good at taking accountability. You and I should talk. Those are my favorite conversations to have. If you're not taking ownership, if you're not taking responsibility, if you don't have a sense of accountability in your life, there's a reason for it. There's something in your brain that is telling you that this is the best way to do things. You're not irrational. You're not crazy. You're not stupid. Helping people get to the root of that is something I really enjoy. It's a frequent conversation I have with so many people, and it just manifests in so many different ways. It's really interesting, and it's fun to see people start to take ownership. I have free 15-minute discovery calls just to see if we're a good fit, to see if I want to help you with what you want to work on, to see if you want me to help you or not. You can find my calendar. It's just calendly.com/James Henson. And if you go there, that'll just pull you up right to where the 15-minute discovery calls are. But I've helped a lot of people with this. I've had to work through it in my own life, and I like taking what I've learned and sharing it with others. So if there's anything in this conversation that hits you, that's something we should talk about. That's something I can help you with. And it's one of those things that will change your life and open up all sorts of new opportunities for you. I want to thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this or watch these things that I create. So in 2 weeks, we're going to talk about gratitude. If I had timed this all better and been smarter, I would have had that land right around Thanksgiving, but I didn't. So we're going to wrap up the year looking at that. That is another mindset and way of being that can change everything in your life if you let it. So once again, thank you so much for taking the time to listen or to watch. I really appreciate it, and I will look forward to talking to you next time. Take care.